baby, this is gonna be a doozy. A doozy. The 2000s, want to say the 2000s were absolutely correct for some of the things that they exposed us to. Taking a reflection on certain movies that were made for the purposes supposedly to encourage people to love themselves as they are, that they are beautiful as they are, that it's not about looks. Looks aren't everything. It's about the person that you are. I truly wanted to take a look back on these movies. One of these movies not being that old, actually. It was released as late as 2018, just a few years ago. With these movies being made, I would like to think that they were made with good intent and with a good purpose, but did these movies did everything right? This topic is very interesting to me because I feel like there is a lot of nuance when it comes to these films, and oftentimes when you look at some of these movies, people will take that strong stance. No, this is trash. This is terrible. Monstrosity. I have been aware. I have seen the many videos talking about Shallow Hal and how dated that shit is. However, I do want to give all of these movies a fair chance. I have seen every single one of these movies. Shallow Hal I actually grew up with. And really go into this with a fair perspective, fair judgment on what exactly these movies did wrong, but also some of the things that I think they did right. But it does have to be acknowledged that they're not perfect movies by any chance. And some of the things, girl. And for how I talk about these movies, I'm going to go in order of the movie I think did the worst job depicting a self-love, looks don't matter message, to the one that I think did the best job. Not necessarily meaning it's a perfect movie, but what I think did the best job in that order. So starting her off with the most obvious choice, the most absolutely correct thing I might have ever seen, and it's absolutely no place in the 2020s in today's day, but it was made in the 2000s. Shallow Hal. Oh boy. Shallow Hal. What a time. I look at this movie and I think of myself as a fossil because what a time. Shallow Hal is a 2001 romantic comedy starring Gwyneth Paltrow and Jack Black. Written and directed by the Farrelly brothers. His most notable works at the time were the original Dumb and Dumber and There's Something About Mary. If you see these guys' comedy style, the best example I can give you is similar in the style to Seth MacFarlane's Family Guy humor. So they do this film, and at the time, it did fairly well at the box office. However, now that time has passed, a lot of people have issue with this movie. And if you aren't aware of what the movie is about, it is about a man who falls in love with a 300-pound woman after being hypnotized into only seeing a person's inner beauty. So the first main issue I want to talk about here, and we will get into more detail later on, but I do have to talk about how, unfortunately, there was a body double for Gwyneth Paltrow in this film, okay? Like I said, there's supposed to be a 300-pound woman that Jack Black's character, Hal, falls in love with. However, he sees her as Gwyneth Paltrow. But for the audience, there were scenes spliced here and there of the actual body that's supposed to be Gwyneth Paltrow's character, who is supposed to be 300 pounds. And that body double has now come out all these years later, saying how unfortunately she experienced an eating disorder after this film, which is so sad. It is so devastating hearing that this film affected her that much. She goes on saying in her interview how they were nice to her, you know, both Paltrow and Jack Black were very nice to her, and it seemed like she didn't have any issues with the crew or anything going on with filming. But once the film was released, and seeing how her body was used, unfortunately, as the butt of a lot of jokes, which you can imagine what that does to a person, right? She goes on record saying, "It didn't occur to me that the film would be seen by millions of people. It was like the worst parts about being fat were magnified. Absolutely unfortunate. So terrible. It just goes to show that a film like this should be very, very careful and cautionary with their framing and what they consider a joke. That's already starting this off pretty bad. Let me go into actually something that I think the film did pretty well. So we start off the story with Hal's father dying. Dying on his deathbed. This is all while Hal is a child still. And he's looped up on some medication, so he doesn't know what the he's saying, apparently. Like, he's drugged up. And Hal goes into his room to bid his goodbyes, and as he does so, his father tells him that the only thing that's important in life are hot babes, is a bunch of ass.
Hot young tales, what it's all about, with a perfect can.
The only thing that's important in life is ass. Even though this scene is obviously played up for also comedic effects, because it's like, of all the things for his dad to say on his dying deathbed, like, that's the one thing that he's saying. Obviously, it's very outrageous. I do like that they put that in there, because although a small scene, and although it's taken way out of proportion, because this does affect Hal as he grows up, and this does affect his mentality on how he views women. I'm happy they did put this in here, because to me, that showcases what affects us as a human and what our values and beliefs are. A lot of that does come from home. I think that's fair to say. It's the way you're raised. And for me, that's exactly what happened. A lot of my values, a lot of my beliefs came from my family and what they taught me to believe and what they taught me to value. And so I liked that they put this in the movie, because to me, that's just a small piece of showcasing that and representing that. How your parents, your childhood, how you're raised does affect how you view things. And that's exactly what happened to Hal and has affected Hal. As we then get a flash forward to now Giga Chad Hal, busting some nut Hal. And the first portion of the movie really is getting into his psyche, how he only goes up to these women at the club who look a certain way. And we'll get to that. We will get to that. We see him only going for those types of women at the club with his friend Maurizio. All of this leads to him one day being stuck in an elevator with none other than Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins, who, if you guys aren't familiar with Tony Robbins, he's an icon. Who is he actually? He is an American author, coach, and speaker, and he's known for his seminars, self-help books. He's like a guru. This very wise, educated man. So he's stuck in an elevator with this guy, and this is a very important scene right here, because it just goes to show how we are not supposed to take Hal seriously. We're not supposed to take this man serious. The guy asks him what his ideal woman is, and Jack Black says, someone with Britney Spears' tats, but she's a little too hefty on her arms, so maybe like Pamela Anderson's arms, but then not the hair, because the hair's kind of weird.
That Britney Spears girl, she got great knockers, but she's a tad muscular. Actually, you know what? Her ass would do too if she had a better grill, like Michelle Pfeiffer back when she did Grease 2. But she'd have to be a little smilier than Michelle, kind of like Rebecca Romaine Stamos before she got Stamos, but not as skinny as Rebecca. Someone a little meatier like Heidi, but without the accent. You know, those accents. Yeah.
He's so serious. So with this conversation, we as the audience have to understand, we cannot take this man serious. He is absolutely insane. He is absolutely nuts. He's looking for something that like doesn't even exist, essentially. He's nitpicking the shit out of all these already beautiful women, and that's not even enough for him. We also get a little bit of an insight how it seems like his father has affected him. That encounter with his father is what has caused him to think this way and have this kind of mentality.
I don't really remember my dad. He died when I was 9. My mom thinks I might have been a little traumatized by the whole thing.
Tony Robbins is like, Hal, bet. I'm gonna do you one favor. I'm gonna do you one good. Now, every time you meet a woman, you're gonna see her for her inner beauty. You're gonna see her for who she is on the inside. So, this is where we start getting into negative territory. Compliments to some things of the movie so far, but here are some controversial things. Here's where it starts. Afterwards, He gets hypnotized. We see him interacting with these beautiful women who on the outside are not conventionally attractive, not the societal standard beauty attractive, but he starts seeing them as societal standard beauty and conventionally attractive. And when I say that, I mean these white, model-esque, tiny women. They are obviously gorgeous. I'm not here to say that they're not beautiful. They're obviously beautiful. This is where people, and myself included, I can absolutely see this argument, have issue because why is it that all of these beautiful women look the same? Tiny, model-esque, and white. Every single one. I think maybe one of them seems to be a little ethnically ambiguous that he meets at the club at one point, but for the most part, everyone he meets that's beautiful is that. So that's where the movie is already pretty like, what are you doing? What are you trying to say? Because if you're trying to represent inner beauty and how someone would look gorgeous to this man, maybe have a little bit more diversity in there. There are so many different types of beauty, right? Beauty in the eye of the beholder, as we always say. It's just weird that you would choose to only represent this one type in your film. You know, you're not hammering in your message that great if that's what you're doing here, right? This is definitely one of the main points of contention I can see for this movie, being not the best at trying to represent what matters is you're beautiful on the inside, is you're gorgeous, what's on the inside is what matters. But then when you're showcasing these supposedly beautiful women that are the same beauty archetype, starts making your message a bit confusing. But I will also give this argument if you want to see it this way, but I more so side with the point that I just made. You could potentially see it as what Hal finds attractive. Maybe once Tony Robbins did the spell on him, maybe what he's seeing as the physical attractiveness, the inner beauty, but what's specifically physically attractive to him as a person, and not necessarily what is physically attractive overall. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe it's the case where this is just for Hal's mind and this is just what he physically prefers. That's the only potential counter argument I have with that. But even that, like, I will say that's a yeah.
You sure about that?
And it gets more problematic. This isn't even the most problematic. This is just part of the problematic. Then he meets Rosemary, who ends up being his love interest, Gwyneth Paltrow. Already, he's making I would say that's a fat joke, right? She's holding up these large pair of panties, and he's just like, oh, are you trying to build a boat with that? Are you sailing with that? I'm like, what the sir? Sir? Oh my god, imagine, you're just panty shopping, and this man comes up to you with the audacity. Any type of comment, okay, it would have been any type of comment from a man that it just would have taken me out personally. Like, leave me alone. Leave me alone while I'm shopping for my panties, please. But anyway, that was always one scene that I was like, this is so awkward for a first meet. Like, why would you even call? Anyway, he then apologizes, which good. You should apologize for that. And offers to take her out, and they do. They go out on this semi-date, and already this is where the cracks start to crumble. Starts making fat jokes, and when I say that, I mean quite a bit. Like, not just a one-off, like throughout the entire film, there are many fat jokes. What are you trying to say? If this is truly supposed to be that what matters is what's on the inside, love yourself, why are you poking fun at overweight people? I don't understand. We're at the restaurant, and as she's sitting on a normal-ass chair, it breaks. And that's supposed to be the joke. Haha. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. That's supposed to be the joke. It's just that it broke. She broke a chair. A steel chair. Okay. And like, in what world? In what world? I think my father at one point was around 300 pounds and there was no chairs broken. Like, what? And that's just the start. That's just the start. They do the joke again in a way later scene where they're at a restaurant and she literally breaks a whole ass bench. Like, how is that funny? How is this a joke? Could you not be more creative? Truly. But that's not all. That's not where it ends. Again, throughout the entire film, there are so many fat jokes, which is just insane. There's like this whole montage where they're going on dates and she's tipping over the canoe that they're in and he's like, what? She basically clears out a pool. Cause she dives in the pool and this kid gets stuck in a tree. I don't know. There's also the friend who makes the comment that she's a fucking rhino. What the And then again, just again and again and again, just all of these jokes. That's like, what's the point of your movie? Are you truly trying to make people feel better about themselves, that it doesn't matter what they look like, that what beauty is on the inside? Because this is so contradictory. That's just unfortunate. But on the positive, let's go back to a positive here. I do like how they touch upon Mauricio and kind of develop him as a character in a way, because he is also someone with insanely high standards and insane expectations. They show him having a thing with this gorgeous girl, and yet he refuses to go on another date with her and refuses to go out with her because of a toe. Because of a toe. Because she has a long toe. So that already showcases with his character to also not take him seriously, because what the perfectly nice girl, yeah, refuses to go out with her because of that. So with that, we already know not to take him seriously. So with him being so rude to Rosemary and calling her a fucking rhino, like, don't take it seriously. And we further understand that the reason why he's like this is because of his own insecurities and because he's projecting his own insecurities on other women, which is not okay. Obviously not okay, but we come to finding that out, and he comes to realizing how wrong of a mentality that is by the end of the film as well, because he has some weird defects. I don't know, like, he has some tail. I don't even know what this was. he has a tail, like a dog. Like, I don't know. And that makes him feel very insecure. And without saying too, I don't even think he says it, but it's clear to the audience that this is also an insecurity, is his hair, because he uses some kind of thing to make it so that his hairline is not receding and that it looks like he has more hair than he does. So for that, I liked that they added that in there, because it goes to show how people will project their insecurities onto others. Another thing that was interesting to me, let me know what y'all think about this one, because I still have conflicting feelings on this one. So they don't only show people for their inner beauty and how conventionally attractive they look because of their inner beauty, but they also show one woman being ugly because of her inner ugliness and how she actually is conventionally attractive, but to Hal, he sees her as not attractive because of her innards, because she's not a good person. This was interesting to me, and again, I would love to hear your thoughts, because they display her looking unattractive by casting this older woman, and I guess that's what's portrayed as ugly in this film. So let me know what you guys think, because I don't know, I think of all of the things what they could have chosen to portray an ugly person, having it be repped by an older lady Is that saying something against older people now? You know what I mean? Is this offensive to older people? Because I could see that. Kind of rude to older people. But then it's also like, how else were they supposed to portray ugly? You know, I'm very curious to hearing your thoughts on that one. And eventually, again, as a positive, which I did really like about this as well, is we hear from Rosemary herself how she feels about herself and how she views herself. From their first date, it's very clear that she has a low self-esteem, which is very unfortunate. And she tells Hal, you know, thank you for the meal, but if this is goodbye, then this is goodbye. She says something along those lines, basically insinuating she doesn't think he's into her. And that's just one instance. In another instance, Hal keeps calling her beautiful, and she tells him straight up, stop calling me that. Don't call me that anymore, because I know it's bullshit. And he's like, what are you talking about? You are gorgeous. And she just refuses to believe this and has this whole speech on how she knows that she's just one of the boys. She's not one of the girls that guys go after. She's one of the girls that boys view as a friend.
I'm not beautiful, okay? And I never will be.
I did like this because we then, as I was mentioning earlier, see even more how you are raised affects you mentally and affects how you view yourself and affects your values and opinions, because we are introduced to her parents later on in the film. The dad himself, to Hal, makes all these comments about Rosemary, and even Rosemary to her face, he's just like, what the hell are you wearing? Why are you wearing that? Like, he's embarrassed, and he tells Hal how, you know, like, she's not a cheerleader, you know, she's not like that. And Hal gives him a really good speech on, you know what, you're the reason why she's so down on herself. You're the cause that made her feel this way about herself and why she doesn't think she's good enough, because you have these absurd expectations, absurd standards.
It never occurs to you that your kids are people.
She doesn't think that she's beautiful, and now I see why. So I liked this whole arc in the movie, because that is true. That is something that absolutely happens. It's with your upbringing. If your own parents are telling you you're not that great, if your own parents are like, what the hell are you wearing, judging you just based off of your body, then yeah, that is going to affect you mentally. That is going to affect how you view yourself. I did really appreciate that the movie put that in there as well, because that is something that happens, unfortunately, as well. And people need to learn how to love their kids. Lastly, the ending, right? This is something that, for me, and I'm just saying this personally for me, and what I personally took away from this film does not mean that everybody else is going to take that away from this film. I completely understand that. That's what makes us human. We all have our different thoughts and opinions and takeaways from things. I know that even though what I'm about to say was my takeaway from the film, I understand how other people would not take that away from the film. For me, as I was a kid growing up with this movie, because yes, I did grow up with this movie, my takeaway when I was a child, I did think the ending was nice and tried to hone in the message of, you are beautiful as you are. You don't need to be societal standard beauty. That doesn't matter. Looks do not matter. You are beautiful as the person you are, and that's what matters. I say that with a grain of salt because I do know people also have issue with Gwyneth Paltrow in a fat suit, and this is where we do see her in a fat suit. So there is that. You know, there is that issue that I see that. I see that issue. But I do find it really sweet when he just looks at her for the first time without her looking like Gwyneth Paltrow, but her looking like her normal self, how she usually looks as Rosemary. And I just loved it because he looks at her and he's like, oh my God, you're beautiful.
Oh my God. You're beautiful.
I don't know, for me it always touches me because he sees all of her. You know, he sees her inside, outside, and it's all beautiful to him. And I thought that was a really sweet message. And it looks like they're not trying to change her by the end, you know? There's no indication that she should change by any means, and she should just stay as she is. But then they also have to ruin it with a fat joke. Because she also gets in the car as they're driving away, and it notably tilts tilt so that it's because it's supposed to be because of her weight, and it's just with the takeaways from this film. I've looked at some articles and interviews with the Farrelly brothers, and they have stated that apparently their intent was a nice message of inner beauty and a nice message of, looks don't matter, and they wanted to drive home that positive message, but there were a lot of questionable things. There were a lot of questionable things with it, for sure. I have like a little speech by Tony Robbins at one point. He says how society is brainwashing us into believing there's a certain beauty, and society is telling us what beauty is. So how is that not brainwashing? So I liked that scene too. I liked that point.
Everything you know about beauty is programmed. Television, magazines, movies, they're all telling you what's beautiful and what isn't.
Overall, the film, like I said, I made points as to why I think there have been positives with this movie. I think there were some things that the movie was doing right and was doing good, but unfortunately it does get overshadowed by the fat jokes, by putting Gwyneth Paltrow in a fat suit, and by having all of the inner beauty women looking like the same type of beauty in the same category of beauty, of tiny model-esque white. Next, another controversial topic, but not because of the movie. A little bit because of the movie, but mostly because of the person attached to the movie. Amy Schumer's I Feel Pretty. Ay. This one actually was more of a recent release. This came out in 2018 and is trying to drive home the same message of self-love, self-acceptance. This one flips the script, flips the narrative, and has it being told from the person experiencing themselves looking different. So with Hal, he was the main protagonist of his movie, but he was seeing other people differently. Whereas Amy Schumer's character in this movie, Renee, she sees herself looking differently, and it's from her lens with how she views herself looking differently. I'll give you a brief overview of this. Yeah, this was released in 2018, written and directed by Amy Kahn and Mark Silverstein, which they don't really have a repertoire. I looked into their repertoire of things and they haven't really done much, if I'm being honest with you. Stars, as I said, Amy Schumer. And it's about a ordinary woman who struggles with feelings of insecurity and inadequacy on a daily basis. And she wakes from a fall believing that she is suddenly the most beautiful and capable woman on the planet. With this newfound confidence, she is empowered to live her life fearlessly and flawlessly. But what will happen when she realizes her appearance never changed? With this film, I will say I do believe overall it did a better job with the message and how it was represented and showcased throughout the movie. And I think overall it did do a lot of things right with how this was depicted in this film. We get this whole introduction sequence of Renee and her life and how she struggles with things on what seems like a daily basis. What she thinks is simply because of how she looks. And I want you to remember that. It's what she thinks is because of how she looks, right? There are different examples at the beginning of this movie where she encounters people and they treat her rudely. There's this case where a salesperson at a clothing store rudely makes a comment that sizing in the store is limited and she can probably find her size online. You yourself. I hated that, but that does happen because it literally happened to one of my family members. And it's so rude. She encounters that with that girl. She encounters this guy at the drugstore where she encounters this other woman that she kind of became friends with at spin class, and she is notably conventionally attractive. I do want to keep stressing the conventionally societal standard beauty attractive, and he approaches her, tries to get her number, and as soon as Amy Schumer speaks, he's like, no, we're good, sir, we're good. And then the other thing to note during this opening sequence here that I've seen some discourse online, and I would like to talk about, is how this movie depicts Amy Schumer as overweight and also kind of makes its own fat joke. Definitely not nearly as insane to the point of Shallow Hal, like not on that level, But there is some in here, which I will agree was not necessary. But to me, it really was just between 1 to 2 scenes that were showcasing this. It wasn't a running gag that went throughout the movie, which is good. But there is one scene at the beginning with her on the bike. She gets on the bike and then it breaks. And it's like, why did it break? It seemed like they were insinuating because she's the weight that she is that it broke, but it's like, what? I don't want to make this all about her and her body. I'm not here to do that. I will just make that point because it is something that has been talked about with this film, so I have to talk about it. But I will make the point that she does seem like average weight. I think it's fair to say that. I think it's fair to say she's not obese. It is kind of weird that they made that initial joke already at the beginning of the movie. And then there's also a scene later on where she's dancing. She has her shirt like a crop, and this is while she believes that she looks different, and she's dancing and everything. And so some people took this as is trying to poke fun at her and her body while she's dancing. But for me, I took it as this is a moment of her being confident in herself and her loving herself and how she looks, and other people loving it as well, because notably the crowd is cheering her on, the crowd is loving it. So I didn't take it as making fun of her and her body. I didn't take it that way, but I could see if you do take it that way. It's different because if you want to compare with Shallow Hal, there are those scenes where they show her being 300 pounds and then people snickering or making comments and things like that, and that is making fun of her weight, right? Whereas this, everybody was cheering, you know, like the crowd was into it. So I didn't see it that way because of the framing of the scene. But again, like, you could argue maybe you did see it that way, and you could argue that, but that's just my takeaway. My counter argument, though, with this not being the focal point of the film, that the focal point isn't her and how she looks, but the focal point is her own self-esteem and how she feels with herself. And the issue isn't her not being this model-esque, that type of attractive, but the issue is that she herself just doesn't love herself and doesn't have confidence in herself. Because I've also seen that argument, like, she has one of those, I forget what it's called, it's like shapewear, I think it's called. But when they show that, I don't think it's the movie trying to say that she's this obese girl or anything like that. I think it's the movie saying that she does that because she doesn't feel secure in her own body, and she feels the pressure into doing that herself, but that doesn't inherently make her obese. Very, very interesting. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, but that was just my takeaway. A lot that I said there. Overall, I think the intro of this movie does a good job of showcasing that and how she compares herself to other people, and she believes that being beautiful, like conventionally societal standard beauty, will make all of your problems go away, will make life so much easier for you. That her one thing that she's striving for is just to be conventionally attractive. It's all she's fixated on. She then undergoes her own type of spell, where her spell happens because she knocks her head during spin class, and she wakes up, and when she wakes up, she looks at herself and she's just like, oh, my legs, they're perfect, and my arms, and my abs, look at my abs. And then she's like, look at me, I'm beautiful. With this is where I am happy the film did this. Let me know your thoughts, but I think this is exactly with kind of what we were saying with Shallow Hal. That was an issue, that they fixed this issue here. We never see what Renee sees. She wakes up, and it's notable from how she's viewing herself in the mirror, with how she's viewing her body, with her comments, that she sees someone else. She does not see how she normally looks. She's looking at someone that looks different to how she normally looks. But us as the audience, we never see what Renee sees. We never see that. So easily you could have fallen into that trap like Shallow Hal, where they cast some conventionally societal standard beauty attractive girl, and we see that. They could have chosen to just show that for this one scene for us as the audience to see what Amy Schumer's character sees, but they choose not to. They choose not to show anybody else except for Amy Schumer. And we as the audience are left to rely only on her words, only on her description. And for us, that's all that we need. That really is all that we need, is to know that she views herself differently, that she views herself as looking beautiful. But what does that beauty mean? Could be anything. It's up to interpretation. During this, she does start to gain her own self-confidence simply because of how she looks. All the while, everybody else sees her the same. She looks the same to everybody else. And so this is what I do like about this movie, is because of her own self-confidence, because of her own radiant, positive attitude, she then starts getting the things that she wants in life. She gets the job that she dreams about. She gets a dude. She gets a whole ass boyfriend. She starts succeeding in her job. She gets more outspoken and confident in herself to speak to important people in her company. So she then gets promoted. Positive after positive thing keeps happening simply because of her believing in herself and loving herself, which I think that's great. That's also a great message to have. That it doesn't matter how you look, you can still have good things happen to you if you make it happen, if you believe in yourself, if you love yourself, which is great. And the movie does touch upon also her starting to get clouded by this, and that she starts getting an ego on her. So not just confidence, but cockiness now. And she herself starts to kind of treat people like shit, and how it gets to her head. So that was also pretty good to me, because yeah, people will have an ego on them if they think they're the shit. And then I also like the slight touch upon masculinity and how men themselves also will have insecurities. The boyfriend that we are introduced to, there's a scene where he meets this conventionally attractive man, Dickon. They're having a dinner, and he notably keeps trying to copy him because of his own insecurities, because he strives to be more like this conventionally attractive guy. So I like that too, that it touches upon how it's not just women who go through insecurities, you know, different people go through insecurities. It's not too explored upon, but it was just a nice touch. We then get, eventually, she knocks her head again and then sees herself again, notices that she looks like herself, even though she looked like herself this entire time. And then she gets down on herself again, regains her low self-esteem, and thinks the worst of herself. And want to do this big speech for her company. It's the attractiveness. It was all because of the attractiveness. She thinks that all these good things happen to her because she's attractive. She then eventually does come to find and realizes that she looked the same the entire time. And she does give this speech, which I did really like this speech. It's a speech about how, you know, as little girls, we don't think about these things, how we just let our bellies hang out and we're innocent and we just don't care. But then eventually that cracks and we do start getting insecure and start overthinking. We have to stop nitpicking at ourselves and just love ourselves, because we have the power, we have the control to make our lives with what we will, and we have the power to say that we are more than just what our appearance is. We are so much more than that, and it was just... loved it. I loved that. That was so good.
When someone tells us that we aren't good or thin or pretty enough, we have the strength and the wisdom to say what I am is better than all that.
And then the movie ends, and she loves herself, and it's great. So didn't like how Emily's character is viewed in Amy Schumer's character's eyes. And I guess that is the point, but I just wish they did a little bit of a better job honing in a point, which is that just because you look a certain way doesn't mean you don't have your own struggles. So they do show it, right? So there is a point in the film where Amy Schumer's character, Renee, she realizes that, you know, anybody could have a struggle. It doesn't matter if you look a certain way, because Emily's character is crying because she got broken up with. And for me, again, I think they could have done just a bit of a better job with this scene, just because at one point Emily's character does admit that she has her own insecurities and she has her own mental issues that she's working through, and to which Renee responds, "Shut up. I just want to punch you in your face right now. Shut up.
Struggle with self-esteem, so
I want to punch you right in your dumb face.
And then she does apologize for it, but just that interaction, I think, could have been handled a bit better, just because it is true, though. That Mean Girl scene, okay, that highlights it perfectly, in my opinion. My pores are huge. My nail buds suck. That does showcase what women go through, what people go through, because you could look conventionally attractive. That doesn't mean those people might not have their own mental struggles. I think that scene could have been done better. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to say with this one. I think overall, like I said, it did do a better job than Shallow Hal when it came to self-esteem and driving home the message of it doesn't matter how you look, you should not care just about how you look. Even Renee's friends at one point, they're just like, that is so sad. You're only thinking about the way you look. That is so sad. Which it's true. Like, that should not be the only thing you're fixated on. I think overall the movie did a good job portraying how your own self-confidence can make a difference. You believing in yourself can make a difference. I think that's a great message as well. It was pretty solid. Overall, I think it was pretty solid. Say what you want about the humor. Say what you want about Amy Schumer. I get it. Someone else is casted in her role. I feel like it might have been better received. I feel, just because I know people are strongly opinionated over Amy Schumer. I get it. It is by far not a perfect movie, but I think this one had things in place to make it better than Shallow Hal. I think so. I think it's fair to say. Lastly, what I actually consider the best of all of these, I think she's out of my league when it comes to self-esteem, when it comes to self-acceptance and self-love. I actually think it did a better job out of all of these. I like it too because it does showcase it's not just women who have insecurities. People in general have insecurities. And so it is cool. I do like it for that alone. It does showcase how men have insecurities too. That's great. So She's Out of My League came out in 2010. This one's more of a romantic comedy and was directed by Jim Field Smith and written by Sean Anders and John Morris. And I could not, for the life of me, tell you guys what the credits of these men are. I think the most that the two writers did was Tut Tut Time Machine. And the premise of this is simply an average man who begins a relationship with a very attractive woman and is warned by his friends that it is doomed to fall apart because of their differing appearances. Very, very simple. With this one, I do like it simply because there's no magic. There is no spell. There is no out-of-worldly hypnosis. Like, there is nothing else going on here in this movie. It's just life. And so with that alone, I have to give the movie snaps and props for in comparison to the other two, because the fact that they were able to drive home the message without needing anything extra, supernatural, whatever, happening to the guy, I like that. And this one stars Jay, oh my god, these last names, Baruchel, Alice Eve, TJ Miller, and Kristen Ritter. This one is awesome because he's this average dude who works at the airport with his buddies, and during one of their shifts, they run into this super hot, super conventionally attractive woman, and all these guys are immediately in my pants. Woof. Absolute pervert. And he's the only dude with some semblance of sense. He's the only guy that treats her like a normal human being. That's instantly a plus to him and showcasing how he's a great person as a person. That's pretty sad to say, actually, because he's simply doing the bare minimum and treating her like a normal human. Then finds her phone. She loses her phone when she goes on her flight, and he connects with her friend so that he is able to return it to her. He then returns the phone to her, and she offers tickets for them to go see this hockey game, and he's just like, yes. And so then he immediately comes to the conclusion that she is trying to set him up with her friend. But because his friend puts that idea in his head initially that, oh, obviously, she's hooking you up with her friend. Immediately, right? Puts that thought in his head. And then as the double date continues, her friend, her name's Molly, by the way, Molly's friend tells him, you know Molly's into you. And he's like, what? And he's like, what? Just not believing this. And after this, he has this bowling session with his friend, and his buddies are just like, there ain't no way this is gonna work out because you are a 5 and this Molly is a 10. She's a solid, rock hard 10.
I love Kirky, but let's face it, the guy's a 5. This girl's too hot.
And I do love this because it's so true. Like, this is so relevant and relatable to today's day, to this society. Because yes, be honest, the rating system, that was introduced to me, I think, when I was in uni. And I was like, what the f*** is that? What the f*** does that mean? But no, people use it. People use that rating system. But to the point, this is the main crux of the movie, and why I think it is above the other two is because his friends, in particular one friend, his best friend, supposed best friend, keeps giving him the idea that he is not good enough. He's the one filling his brain throughout the film that it's not going to work between the two. It's not going to happen. Every time that they keep progressing, he's like, it's doomed to fail. He just keeps putting these negative thoughts in his brain simply because she's supposedly just so far out of his league that he is not good enough for her. Even more so, we do get a scene with him and the family. She meets the family, and you can tell that it's also sprung from the family. Like we said before with Shallow Hal, how they had that in Shallow Hal. I'm happy they had that here, because it also showcases, yes, how you view yourself can come from home and the way you grew up and how you're raised. How you view yourself is really what the people around you are telling you. If you're surrounding yourself with people who constantly tell you you're not good enough, you're not that good looking, you suck, like, you're gonna start to believe it. And when they showcase the family, they don't show them as being like the worst, I guess, but obviously not the best either. The brother, for example, is one of those dudes that's always trying to one-up him. Look what I got going on for me type of thing. The mom and dad don't really do much to boost his confidence.
The hell are you doing with numbnuts here?
Dylan!
Oh, all right, well, fair question. That's a fair question?
His view of himself comes from his surroundings and the people around him, his family, his friends, all telling him these negative things about himself. So he believes he's shown time and time again being a really nice guy. Going to show that obviously, yes, looks aren't everything, looks don't matter. And I think the movie does drive that message home really, really well because, yeah, they show him being an absolute gentleman to her. Not until that he runs into one of her exes and he tells him that she has a defect. And he's like, oh, what is a defect? And the ex is just like, well, I can't tell you that, but you'll figure it out. And ugh. He's here thinking that it's something insane for whatever reason. They're about to bang. And she then tells him not to freak out, that she has something. And he's just like, oh, okay, like here it is. This is the defect. And then she shows him that she has webbed feet. And that's it. And then he gets mad at her. The audacity, because of his own insecurities, because he's just like, yeah, I thought you were gonna have like a twin on your back or something. He has this attitude on him, making it like it's a her issue, but it's obviously not. This is your issue. And she calls him out on it, how she's like, what, you were expecting me to have some kind of weird thing to me so you could feel better about yourself? What the hell? But he catches an attitude and he leaves. And they break up at that point. By the end of the movie, he's shown going back to his toxic ex and settling for that and looking notably miserable. And then he tells the one friend that was especially very rude to him and very, very down on him, saying that he wasn't good enough. Yeah, it's like you said, right? This is as good as it's gonna get for me. You were right. So then the other friends look at the guy. Yeah, this is your fault. You were the one putting all these ideas in his head. And so then he runs over to his ex, who he gives as his example as why it doesn't work out. Why he thinks Kirk and Molly won't work out is because of his own lived experience. And so he's projecting his own experience and his own insecurities onto his friend, which is not okay. And so he goes and talks to his ex and is just like, hey, I was good to you. I was good to you, right? So then why did you break up with me? You broke up with me because I wasn't good enough for you, right? because of the scale, because you're too good for me. And she tells him straight up, Wendell, you were plenty good enough for me. You just weren't good enough for you. Boom. Boom. Mic drop. Good night. Loved that moment. Just goes to show, again, your own self-confidence, your own self-love goes a long way. How are you going to love another person if you don't love yourself? And so then he realizes that he himself caused that breakup, that it's because of his own insecurities. Why she broke up with him is because of that, not because of the whole she's more attractive or the rating scale. It was nothing to do with that. It was just because of himself. So he finally realizes that, and then runs over to Kirk to make sure that he relays this information and gives him the confidence boost that he needs. I absolutely love that he gets his full circle realization moment and is able to rectify that with his friend. He tells him, I was wrong. You're a 10. You are a 10. And eventually is able to gain that self-confidence in himself and finds Molly, and then they do end up together, which is great. Great movie, great message. I think this one, as simple as it was, and even though it focused more on the romance aspect and less on just himself, I guess, I think this one probably is the best one of the three. I truly do believe that, because it was very simple. It does show how outside sources can affect a person and their self-esteem. And it does hone in the message that, yes, it shows that his insecurities were the issue from exactly their breakup. Like, that was the whole reason. So the movie had its clear message, was able to clearly showcase that, and without making fun of him too, which is great. They found other sources of comedy throughout the film, so they didn't have to, find humor in the expense of making fun of someone else. It was clear that whatever he was being made fun of, which was from usually the friend, it was clear to the audience that, okay, this is the friend saying these things, but it's not showing how society views him as I guess, a troll or something. I mean, I guess there was some scenes with the ex as a negative. Okay, one negative is because the ex, yes, her ex thinks he's gay just because he's hanging out with her, and that he, I guess, looks the way he does. I guess that there's no possible way she's dating him because, I guess, of how his appearance is, and because of this he just assumes that he's gay. That was a wild 0 to 100 assumption. Okay, I think the movie did mostly do a pretty good job of portraying this in a humorous but also fairly realistic scenario, and how outside sources can affect your self-esteem and self-confidence, but at the end of the day, it's all about you and your self-love, and you are able to achieve what you want with just loving yourself. And eventually he did find to love himself and got the girl back, as he should, as he deserved, because he's a great guy. He's a great person. Overall, this one I think is the best out of the bunch, in my humble opinion. That is, oh my god, I am hungry. That is all I really have to say today. Let me know all of your thoughts and opinions respectfully in the comments. I don't think any of these are entirely perfect, but I do think the closest with driving home the message and being able to portray the self-love, self-acceptance message best, I think, was this last one. I think She's Out of My League did it the best, actually. I do. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time.